Good morning. How are you? Well, Tom, good morning. How are you all? But it is not nearly as impressive as you thought. I'm a long time. Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to be with you. For those whom I have not met, my name is Tim Rich. My official title is priest in charge here at All Saints. It's not nearly as impressive as that sounds, but I am delighted to be here and delighted to introduce to you a longtime friend to All Saints and a real gift not only to the Episcopal Church, but really a gift to all of us who are making a journey of faith, and that is Diana Butler Bass. Yay, she is back again very quickly. She is an award-winning author, a popular speaker, inspiring preacher, and one of America's most trusted commentators on religion and contemporary spirituality. She has a passion for sharing great ideas to change lives and the world, and she has done that for many years. I won't throw out a number, but for many, many years. She holds a doctorate in religious studies from Duke University and is the author of 11 books, And besides whatever wisdom she will share with you today, she has another book recently out. It is over there. As you walked in, you walked past it. Just want to let you know as we move from the forum into our 10 o'clock worship, if you don't have a chance to either A, get the book, or B, ask Diana to sign it for you, she will be on the lawn after the 10 o'clock service, and there will be more books for purchase. And with that, let me get out of the way and welcome Diana Butler Bass. Diana.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. It actually is an incredible pleasure to be here in this space. I met Tim a long time ago in New Hampshire, and it was like I couldn't quite place it. I said, "Where was the last time I saw you? Was it Minnesota? Was it?" And he goes, "New Hampshire." And I went, "Oh yeah," it all came flooding back to me many years ago when he worked with Gene Robinson there, and he said, "Have you ever been here before?" I should have said to him, "I think they have an apartment for me somewhere out back," but I didn't. I told him instead about the very first time I ever came to All Saints, which was in 1981. I had just graduated from a certain evangelical college, which is just up the road a bit, right by the ocean in Santa Barbara, and I was living here. I actually lived in Pasadena. I saw my post-college apartment building burned down on CNN last year, and so I was with you all in spirit and tears. And so I lived in Altadena. I was working at a place that was then called the U.S. Center for World Mission. I don't know if any of you are such old timers that you remember that being there. And I was dating a guy who lived in San Marino. I won't say much about him except for the fact that he later on wound up working for the Koch brothers. So it sort of tells you how that relationship worked out, or didn't. And so anyway, we came one Sunday, and George Regas, of course, was the pastor and had his, international reputation as a troublemaker. Here I was, this young evangelical college graduate, sat down. I have no idea what George preached, but it was utterly terrifying. And I remember being very angry about it, and my then boyfriend leaned over. He said, "Have you had enough? Do you want to go?" I said, "Well, the most important part's coming. The Eucharist is coming, and he can't ruin that." And so we went through the familiar words and went up to receive the bread and wine. And I was met by a Eucharistic minister who pressed the bread into my hand and said, the bread of Christ, strength for the journey. And I looked at this person, I went, "What the hell is that? What? Where's the blood of Christ, the body of Christ, the bread of heaven, salvation by sacrificial atonement?" And so my boyfriend then leaned over to me. He said, "Have you had enough?" And I said, "Yes, I will never go back to that place again." I suspect he hasn't been back. But it is great and wonderful joy to have become friends over the years with George Regas and then Ed Bacon, who I texted this morning, and he says hello to all of you. And so here we are again. Diana's back, sort of a home away from home, and I have this new book. Just this slide up here before I get started on my remarks for this morning is a picture of my office in my backyard, which is called the cottage, and that's what it looks like when there isn't 8 inches of snow with 3 inches of ice on top of it. It was 12 degrees when I left home yesterday, but this is what it looks like in July, and it is the place where I write and think and pray. And I have a newsletter for those of you who haven't known this, which is on the Substack platform, and it's called The Cottage. And that's Susan's going to pass around a place where if you want to sign up for it, you can. Or you can just go on your phone and sign up for it. Since this is California, I'm assuming you're a lot more technologically able than some places I go. And so I hope you'll join me there. It's a really fun, amazing project. And as a matter of fact, my new book, A Beautiful Year, has grown out of that newsletter. In the last year, I would say people have asked me the question, what are we going to do now? More than I've ever had people ask me that question. What are we going to do? What do you have to say about what's going on? At first, I kind of wasn't entirely sure how to respond, but then I realized I had been responding before the question was even asked, which is sort of strange, because this project, the cottage, that newsletter, I had been working on that for 4 years. And that meant that I started that newsletter in the last, I think it was like year, 18 months or so of the first Trump administration. And then I took it all the way through the Biden administration, and then all the way through the 2024 election. And I had in my files this incredible number of reflections that were written over and against my fears of fascism, authoritarianism, concerns about economic inequality, environmental crisis, that I had been writing my way through all these things. And I had already been answering the question, what are we going to do? So when it came to doing a new book, I gave an enormous amount of that material to my editor and to my new publisher, and I said, I think there's a book in the midst of all of this. But you never want to write a book that's just a bunch of random essays sort of strung together. Because that's, I don't know, it just doesn't ever seem to gel. But what I did have was every single week in the newsletter, I had been writing something called Sunday Musings. And I had been taking the lectionary texts. I love being in rooms of Episcopalians. I don't have to explain to you what a lectionary is. I had taken the lectionary texts and I had put them up and against news stories. 60, 70, 80 years ago, the great 20th century theologian Karl Barth had recommended that any time you are reading the Bible, you should be reading the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other hand. And that advice, when I first heard it as a seminary student a long time ago, stuck with me, and I had been doing that week after week, year after year at the cottage. And so I had probably about 750 or so essays, and I thought, how can we make this into a story? And a story emerged. A couple months ago, 2.5 months ago, when the book first came out, the very first national podcast I was on was with Heather Cox Richardson. And Heather's obviously, how many of you get her newsletter? It's always like tons of people in every room. Heather's an amazing historian, a remarkable voice, helping us understand these times. And she doesn't really consider herself a Christian. She's not hostile. It's just not what she is. And yet she finds that Christianity is at the center of this crisis that we're in right now about authoritarianism. And she was really excited to have me on. We were both trained about the same time in the same field of history and have known each other for a long time. So as we were going through this interview, she kept asking me one strange question. She kept saying, "Tell me how you understand time. I think this book is really about time." And I was trying to avoid it a little bit because I wanted to talk more directly about the book, and I was not sure that time was the main issue. But guess what? I think that Heather is right. It is a book about time. We don't think about this very often. We take for granted a certain vision of time. It's a vision of time that is in our calendars, our day books, all of the things the very words we use to count our days. You think of our 12-month calendar, you think of our 7-day week. That calendar in that week originates some 2,000 years ago in the Roman Empire. Every one of the months that we name, every month that anybody here was born in, is named after a Roman emperor, a Roman celebration, or a Roman numeral. As a matter of fact, we celebrate the 4th of July, Independence Day, the great birthday of liberty in the United States, on July 4th, the 4th day of a month named after Julius Caesar. So isn't that just a little weird that shouldn't we call that month Thomas Jefferson or something? Martin Luther King month, something else? But no, we celebrate independence on the 4th day of Julius Caesar. Now, you get it. The calendar that we have been carrying around in our pockets, on our phones, hanging on our walls, or planning our time with in our day books, that calendar is this kind of calendar, a calendar that was basically thought out for us by an empire that ruled the Mediterranean world, the very empire that Jesus Christ himself was constantly criticizing all the way through the New Testament. And yet we're still shaped by that calendar. It's been modified through the centuries, yes. The Catholic Church desperately tried to Christianize it, but instead it wound up getting Romanized rather than them Christianizing the Roman Empire. And that calendar that passed down to us was shaped by not only these Latin words, I mean, you could have Latin words and still not be thinking about it, but it was shaped by really 3 intertwined stories to mark the days. And those intertwined stories are, 1, a story of the success of glorious military might. The Romans loved celebrating victories, military victories, their greatest heroes. They celebrated them in their calendars. They celebrated them in their monuments. They celebrated them by erecting great arches. Just saying. Yeah. So that's one of the stories it tells. Another story it tells, of course, while it's celebrating these figures, is it tells a story of empire. It tells a story of a particular form of government based around violence that controlled the world. What they consider to be the world, that known world of the Mediterranean. And third, it celebrated a transactional economic system that was based on the richest people in the empire drawing wealth up from the poorest people and then enmeshing everyone else into a system of transaction and quid pro quo that held you in bondage to the military might of that empire. And so that's what's in your pocket, in case you're wondering, is that we're carrying around this map of time that celebrates those things. And that map of time is set up in a very particular way. It's set up as linear history. And when you have history told in a line, what you have is a very specific story about winners and losers, about the direction of history. You know, I think that picture of Julius Caesar is really interesting. Did you ever notice how dictators tend to love to do this? Just saying. And think of what that is. Forward, ahead, push the future with the might of your own hand. Linear history, beginning, middle, and ending. And where is it going to end? The triumph of Rome. We're so used to telling stories in linear fashion, we don't even kind of think twice when we see a timeline like this show up in a book. This is just a random U.S. history timeline. One of the things I like about showing this timeline to people is it starts up here at the beginning, and it says, the Vikings discovered a new continent, America, but they didn't settle there. That happened in around the year 1000. Don't even quite know. And then the second thing in the timeline is Christopher Columbus sailed to America. He was the first European navigator. Third thing in the timeline, the British founded the first colony of Virginia, Jamestown. My husband's family was there, in Virginia. Now, there's the beginning. It's probably how many of you learned it in school, not all of you. This did change a little bit by the time my daughter was in school, but this is exactly how I learned it in school. This was my favorite part of it. If you could see this up close, underneath the main timeline, there's a little arrow that goes backwards, and it says Native Americans lived as nomads across America. Little tiny, teeny print pointing to the past. Wow, what is there in a line? And then you can see the whole thing goes around and winds up in the glories of contemporary America. This is a picture that I found, some tech guys showed it to me. This is their vision of the timeline that we live in. You can see that human beings started out sort of on their hands and knees, not being able to do much of anything, kind of shaped like primates, which we are. But then we started standing up, and we got like tools, clubs, so we could beat animals and have different dinners. Then we start getting stronger, so we almost stand up. Now we have real tools. This guy has a hammer. The third guy has a hammer. Next fellow has a spear. Woohoo, dinner. And then people are walking. They're striding through history. Now things are starting to change a little bit. You see somebody stooping a little bit, and that doesn't mean decline. He's stooping because you think it's a phone. That's what we all think. That's actually a book. So see, we're moving towards this world that is visually sort of communicated to us. And then we get to sit down from this long journey at a table, at a computer. And then finally, we're all just going to kick back, and the robots are going to take care of us. And this is their line of history. I was with some AI guys in October, and that's how they talked. That's what their vision is. But history, as presented by science, does not have to be a line. One of the things we're learning about time over the last 100 and 150 years is that time curves. Time overlaps itself. Time is almost like a journey itself. I can remember being taught this in a very simple way when I was a little girl. and would watch Star Trek episodes. And they'd go through some portal, and all of a sudden time was different. And if you went to the past, you could change the narrative of the future. I would like to suggest to you this morning that the Christian year is time bent. It's not a beginning, middle, and end kind of thing. Even though many of us were taught to read the Bible by Genesis is the beginning, 7 days of creation. Then there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens about the Jews, and God takes the promise away from Jews, and Jesus is born. And then finally you get to the book of Revelation, and there's going to be the end of time. Beginning, middle, end. The Christian year teaches this story. Time as a circle. It moves through a cycle of roughly 12 months, but it doesn't have 4 seasons like a seasonal calendar. It doesn't celebrate Caesar. Instead, though, that cycle is divided into 2 parts. The first part of the cycle is the story of Jesus, and it unfolds in 5 seasons: Advent, Christmas, Epiphany, Lent, Easter. And then there's the season of Pentecost, which is the actual celebration of Pentecost, which is sort of the conclusion of the Jesus cycle and opens the second half of the year at the same time. And the second half of the year, down here in the bottom, is the story of us. It's the story of how we, having heard the story of Jesus, respond, enact, embody, embrace what Jesus' life was all about: love, justice, mercy. It's a circle. It starts not on January 1st, but as you all know, it starts on the first Sunday of Advent. And the difference with our secular calendar could not be more stark. Whereas we celebrate, in a fun way, the new year on the 31st of December, the 1st of January, with big sparklers and lots of loud noises and parties and champagne and balls dropping, the Christian year starts when night is thickest in the northern hemisphere. And it starts in silence, where we light a single candle against the night. We go through those first 4 weeks lighting one more candle a week. Slow, the new year grows. We get to Christmas, there's a great announcement by angels that God is with us. Peace on earth, goodwill to humanity. Big shouts. So we get one day of radiant light. All those hymns, it's amazing. And then the Christian year, 2 days, 3 days later, gives us a story about a king who won't have it, and instead seeks to murder God, the infant child. This is what the Christian year is like. See, it is like a circle, but it's really like pulsing through in this circular pattern. Is first the light spreads, the light seems radiant, we win Herod. The night comes back, tries to extinguish the candlelight. But then we get this other season, Epiphany, the season of light, revelation, manifestation. The light spreads. It's about to end next week. The Sunday text next week is, "You are the light of the world." After Herod tries to put the light out, at the beginning of Epiphany, by the end of Epiphany, Jesus turns to all of his followers and says, "You are the light. You are the light. Not even bear the light, but you are the light." And now it seems like, oh, we've got the angelic announcement again. Woohoo! End of history, we win. Lent. You may be light, but you're also dust. Some people try to mute this by saying stardust. Yes, but dust is still dust. And so you get Lent. And then Lent takes us through that path to look at ourselves, to look at our world, to try to understand how God is, to look at violence straight in the face. And we get through Lent and we get Good Friday, and that is the deepest, most painful, violent time of the year. And then Easter. Hallelujah. Christ is risen. Now, if I was a Hollywood director, that is where I would end the film. But it doesn't do that. It goes back to Pentecost, where Jesus goes away again, and we're left here on our own until the Spirit comes. And then we get to do something about it in the second half. You see, that's what this circle is like. That's why I put up a picture of a spire. Try to get this idea that time is moving in waves that we don't quite understand, but that the stories seem to keep coming back on us and reminding us of the same themes over and over again. The themes of the victory of justice, the victory of love, the power of those candles against everything that is hurtful and evil and painful and causes suffering in the world. And then the empire strikes back. It just keeps coming back. It doesn't want all of that stuff to win. And that's what I had been writing about for all the years previous. And so then we get this moment in our own life when there's this astonishing backlash, this horrible thing. Where does this come from? We all ask ourselves, what are we going to do? I would like to suggest if we understood this pattern that is deep within the Christian story, we would have been waiting for it. Because this is the story. Every time the world moves ahead to include more chairs at God's table, to bring more people into the circle of light and the love of God, the peace and justice that God always intends for humanity, every time the empire comes back. Pulses. The thing that I love about this story is every time it pulses, the circle gets wider. Right now we're in a pulse that's moved in, and it feels so painful. We say, what are we going to do? Well, the book's there. The story's there. What did the people before us do? We see great examples in American history. That's actually what my PhD is in. And I am very interested in those. It's interesting, of course, that this particular political moment, they're trying to take that history away from us. I feel it's really important to say that on the first day of Black History Month, is that if you can take away the history of the pulses of inclusion, the pulses of love, the pulses of justice, then all you're stuck with is the story that you're handed by the people in charge. So we have it in our own history. We have it in histories of other countries and cultures as well. But we also have it every single week in our liturgy. And you know what? Nobody can come in this building and take that away. This history has been being told for 2,000 years over and against the history of Rome. And the place where I want to open to questions today is to simply ask you this. What would it be like if we really took seriously the shape of time? The shape of this story. There has been a move in recent decades to help us embody this story more. Not just through what we teach about the Christian year, not just how we tell the story in our sermons and in our books and our classrooms and our Bible studies or what have you, but in our bodies. I do not think that it is any coincidence that the labyrinth has been sort of rediscovered at this moment of history. Because this is a spiritual tool of walking in circles. This picture here I took this summer. I was asked to help to lead Lauren Artress's wonderful pilgrimage that she's been doing every year for 30 years to Chartres Cathedral. She told me I wasn't allowed to take this picture, but I did confess to her after the fact that I had taken it. And on the Thursday night of the pilgrimage, the whole of Chartres Cathedral is handed over to her pilgrimage group. So there were 25 of us. The cathedral doors were locked at 7 p.m., and everyone was taken out. The lights were turned down. These candles were put up around the labyrinth. There is a candle stand, of course, with the prayers in the background at Chartres. And only 25 people are let into the great cathedral at Chartres to walk the labyrinth. Lauren said, take off your shoes at your own risk, because I don't think that they have cleaned the floor in 800 years. I had to throw those socks away, that I did take off my shoes. And I walked this cathedral, walked the great labyrinth of Chartres. I stood there as I was at the entry, and I thought of all of the times I've walked a labyrinth. I've walked the labyrinth at Grace Cathedral. I walked it in the little church around the corner from my house in Alexandria, Virginia. I have walked so many labyrinths. I probably walked 1,000 different times around labyrinths, maybe more. And I stepped into this labyrinth and I thought, what can I possibly feel or learn or hear that I haven't already known? And so my feet, along that incredibly dusty, ancient pathway. And slowly as I walked it, I thought, this is the mother labyrinth. This is the pattern from which all those other labyrinths come. And I got to the center, and I sat down, and I felt time differently. I wasn't just sitting in one place in the summer of 2025, but I literally had this vision of falling through the earth, everything beneath me, stretching down through the floor, through the basement, down past the sacred spring that this whole cathedral is built on, through and to the center of the earth itself. And at the very same time, I was feeling myself rise up through the vaults of the cathedral. Time, literally, when I was there, went off of its axis. And I found myself in an entirely different reality. I don't know how long I sat there. I do know I was one of the last people out of the labyrinth. You see, we can actually touch it because it's real. It is real. The timeline of the empire with its beginning, middle, and end, which winds up with the powerful being victorious over all the rest of us, does not have to be the time in which we live, because there's a deeper, more mystical, powerful, and truer sense of time. And I do also think this is what's trying to be communicated in this particular vision of the cross. It comes to us from Celtic Christianity. You see a lot of crosses like this across the world, where there are the typical kinds of renderings of lines that you would think about, because that's how we humans sometimes know. We know time horizontally, and we know verticality. We think of heaven and earth up and down. But then they take that circle, and that's called the nimbus, meaning the light. And they frame the lines of human experience with that. Time in the Christian year is not what they tell you. It's not what we learned in school. It's something entirely different. And that's what's given me a sense, not of hope. I can't really call it hope. Courage, perhaps. Insight. Passion for this moment now. An ancient story, an old labyrinth, an alternative calendar. Maybe surviving this is a little bit like the Wizard of Oz. Look to what has been on your feet the whole time and you never paid any attention to. The way home might be right there. Thank you very much. So we have about 7 minutes for questions. I'm happy to take a question if you have one. It was a really fun project to put this book together and to think about this whole vision of time behind it.
So yes, the church year is cyclical, and I would hope that the church would see how this is consistent with the more natural, sustainable, environmental cycles that go on throughout life, and we're trying to create a church calendar that is harmonious with natural cycles and everything. I'm afraid, of course, it's very different from our economic cycles where you want to have 6% growth on infinitum, and we need multiple Earths in order to feed all this system that's going to suck it all up. So this conflicts with economics and political stuff and everything else. So it's very difficult to sustain this, but it is nice to have a natural model in nature for this type of cyclical system.
Yeah. One of the things that occurred to me while I was working on the book and framing it with this model of time is that every other world religion has its own calendar. And I was in particular thinking about the fact that Jesus, when he was running around, did his thing, was living off of course, the Jewish calendar. And the Jewish calendar is a seasonal, earth-based agricultural calendar, and it's also a lunar calendar. And so that means that Jesus never had any conception of time like we have time. And he specifically rejected the Roman senses of time when he ran into them. And this is one of the things that got the Jews in so much trouble in the ancient Roman Empire, is that they had an alternative sense of time that had built into it a different vision of economics, a different vision of the environment in which they lived, and a different vision of what human government should look like. And so in a beautiful year, I hadn't been doing it intentionally, but as I wrote this long project over a course of years, I got a lot of other friends who are writers. This isn't a name drop thing, but this just might help you place this comment. I'm very, very close friends with Brian McLaren. We're kind of like brother and sister, so if you know Brian's work. And we were just together in Georgia at a conference a couple days ago, and he's a wonderful human. He called me up one day and he said, Diana, you're really writing in this newsletter an anti-imperial, pro-environmental, and peacemaking vision of the Christian year. And I thought, I had no idea I was writing anti-imperial theology. But I realized but paying attention to this cycle and taking it seriously had led me to the place where I naturally got to what you just said. And see, that's what I'm thinking is that, we've largely allowed ourselves to be colonized by the Roman view of all this and by what you just said. The growth charts in all of our businesses, the kinds of ways we have to maximize profits, the political calendar that tells us that this is the most important election of our lifetime, the consumerist calendar that says you have to do all of your shopping for Christmas on this particular date. And so we have been literally colonized by a calendar that is imperial, violent, and transactional economics. And yet this is our calendar. So Susan is standing up. Okay, one more question.
One more quick question, and because then we got to get her to church because we get to hear her preach as well. Quick question.
Yeah, in 2016, I got to sit down with Tripp Fuller and Walter Brueggemann at Vacation Bible School for Adults. And the word Brueggemann used is, when he was talking about the Exodus, is he was like, there's no archaeological evidence that any of this happened. It's meant to be reperformed. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how you connect to that word reperformance when it comes to these stories.
I love that. And I think Walter Brueggemann, bless his soul,